everything he does is to signal to the radicalized Christian that he will use violence against citizens, because he knows that that radicalized Christian has been indoctrinated and conditioned to believe that Jesus will approve of his action. When I saw this post from Trump, I had a memory of picking up my grandson from nursery school. And his nursery school was held in a church that was highly conservative, highly fundamental. It's a mega church that has perfected the Hillsong model. If you know, you know. By this time, I had already left church. I was deconstructing. When I got to the door of the nursery school, it said that all the kids were in the sanctuary because this week they were holding VBS. So I headed up to the sanctuary and the place was packed. I found my grandson and I just held him as they were singing their songs. And then the associate pastor got up. I know it was the associate pastor because it was a woman, and a woman in those denominations are not permitted to be the head pastor. And on the screen behind her, she put up an image of an injured soldier who had gauze around his head and there was blood seeping through the gauze. He was still in his uniform and he was carrying a weapon. And he was all dirty and muddy, and you could tell he was in a lot of pain. And she talked about the glory and the sacrifice of this young man for his country. Then she shifted that image over so that right beside that image of the injured soldier, she could put a picture of Jesus. And Jesus is in pain. Jesus is suffering. He's got his crown of thorns on, and those thorns are pressing into his head, and there's droplets of blood coming down onto his face. This is a room full of kids. Then she talks about the sacrifice that Jesus made for the world. And she's equating the sacrifice of Jesus to the sacrifice of a soldier. 2 kids. I was horrified for a lot of reasons. Number one, that my 3-year-old grandson was seeing this, even though I was trying to distract him from it. Number two, that level of indoctrination was so prevalent even at this young age. And number three, that I had seen teachings like that before, and it never had occurred to me how radicalized that was until I had deconstructed. Some of you won't believe that this is the type of teaching that goes on inside Christian churches, but it is. And that is the Christian that Trump is talking to. These teachings are intentionally radicalizing, they're dehumanizing, and they're desensitizing, starting that young. So hear me when I say this. The President of the United States just said that millions of Americans are the greatest enemy. And don't let Fox News or your Uncle Billy Bob try to dismiss this, because Trump's language was just as intentional as that pastor using the bloodied image of a soldier next to a bloodied image of Jesus. This is sequential and actionable. It's like I say, I just spring cleaned my bedroom. Now I'm going to move to spring clean my living room. Spring cleaning is a whole different set of actionable steps than just normal cleaning. And you know, now that I'm done with my bedroom, I'm going to use those same kind of actionable steps in my living room. Trump used that same kind of intentional language when he described the enemy within, which is us who vote differently than them, and equated it to the war in Iran. The external enemy becomes the internal enemy, and that is not random. This is a mirror to a well-known pattern where fear is anchored outside the nation and then it's redirected inward, and the church has perfected it. How often did we hear sermons on the enemies of the world, that the world was broken or it was filled with evil because the devil had them in his control? That language isn't about politics, but it activates something much deeper. We were taught that there is an unseen enemy moving to and fro, seeking to devour, and we were trained to be vigilant, to identify, to resist, to cast out. And Trump just gave them a target. Oftentimes when you hear somebody using dog whistles that trigger some of your encoding, you're confused. I hear this from deconstructing Christians all the time. Our nervous system may still recognize that indoctrination. So when you hear greatest enemy, your body may not process that this is dangerous rhetoric. It may process it as a spiritual alertness or even spiritual warfare. That is why this type of Christian indoctrination is so dangerous, because it bypasses critical thinking intentionally and moves straight into conditioned response. If someone has been trained to see enemies everywhere, they do not stop to ask if this label is appropriate or if this is manipulation. And that's the playbook that Trump is using. It is meant to dehumanize, to desensitize, and to radicalize an audience who is already radicalized. Don't forget that this is the side of Christianity that sees empathy as a sin. When empathy is removed, anything done to the target group can be framed as protection and holy and Jesus approved. This is how you get to people rationalizing that school children who are unalived are better off unalived than living in the wrong belief system. This language is intentional, and he wants to fracture or put even more strain on relationships within your family, your workplace, your community, because he wants us not to trust each other. Now he's wanting people to see Democrats as the enemy within. Now, for those of you who are deconstructing, it's important here to pause and see how you're responding to this kind of thing, because many people feel confused, but you need to ask yourself, why are you confused? What's being triggered inside you? Because the only appropriate response is that, yes, this rhetoric is dangerous and it needs to stop. And we all should be expecting Christians from all denominations or beliefs to condemn Trump for calling for violence. And if you have Christians who are saying that this is harmless rhetoric, it's important to let them know that they are radicalized to the point that they no longer care about the well-being of their fellow citizens. They care nothing about their neighbors. They are the antithesis of the Jesus they say they love and follow.